The other thing that we know from research is that when people write down their aspirations, just by writing it down, they're 42% more likely to make it happen. But then the next piece is that by telling someone that you're going to do something, you're actually twice as likely to make it happen. And I think part of that is because the person that you tell has the potential to help you, to support you, to hold you accountable. And so, for that reason, this notion of throwing your hat over the wall, it always involves telling someone, which really helps us sort of just double down on the things that, we really want to make happen. So that's another, when sometimes people say, where do I start? I say, start there. Start there. What would you love to make happen? Where could you throw your hat over the wall? And this is an annual exercise. People do this every year.
Hey friends, welcome to The Good Life with Michelle Lamoureux, a show for women in midlife who want to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Michelle Lamoureux, a self-love coach and the author of Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Each week I bring on world-class experts, best-selling authors, leading entrepreneurs, and also do solo casts with the intention of inviting you to get connected to what you really desire from your life. This show is produced with love every week. There's inspiration and actionable tips in every episode because I want to see women playing a starring role in their lives instead of living on the sidelines. Be sure to join the Good Life community newsletter over at thegoodlifecoach.com for more inspiration and tips to live your best midlife. And make sure you're following the show on your favorite podcast player. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey friends, welcome back. It's Michelle Lamoureux, and today we're going to talk about how to create the life you want in just 1 year. Joining us is Wendy Leshgold, who's the president and co-founder of the Fast Forward Group, a professional development and executive coaching company. Wendy spent more than a decade in advertising, leading teams at Ogilvy and Mather, BBDO, and Deutsch, and working with brands including Apple, Kodak, and IBM. She experienced firsthand the challenges people face in high-pressure corporate environments. Feeling compelled to help, she launched a successful executive coaching practice. A decade later, she joined forces with her childhood friend, Lisa McCarthy, who shared her vision. She's the co-author of Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Great to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited. We were talking before the mics went on just about how excited I am about this topic because on my show, I've covered 10-year plans. It seems like a lot of my guests are really jazzed up about this idea of having a longer term vision, including a doctor who is 102 years old sharing her life vision for 10 years out. And I was thinking that one of the things that I was thinking about recently and kind of struggling with was wait, but what about the short term? How do I get to those shorter term goals? And then I found your book and I was like, oh, wait, this is awesome. So now we can dive in because I think it's important to be long-term visioning and short-term.
Great. Yes. Agreed. We were very thoughtful about the time frame of a year. Because it's a completely different type of vision that you get when you're looking out a year versus when you're looking out 5 or 10 years, because you can be so much more specific and so much more vivid in how you describe it.
Completely. And I am excited to get some of the tactical advice you can give us, because I think a lot of women are going to want to play with this and figure out how they can design their own successful year as they define it. But I thought it was fun how you teamed up with a childhood friend who I believe, if I read in your book, you met at camp, like sleepaway camp. How did that come about?
Sleepaway camp has changed my life in so many ways, but I think that is the most dramatic way, is meeting Lisa. And when we were 10, we met in camp. We became very, close friends, always were. And then when we were in our 20s, we always talked and dreamed about one day maybe starting a business together. But at that time in our 20s, we did not know what that was going to look like. And we both sort of went on our parallel track, building our careers, building our families, and then came back together 11 years ago and really saw an opportunity to do something that was really meaningful. And that is when we decided to start the Fast Forward group. We both had, spent a lot of time in the corporate spaces. She was worked with big media companies. I was in big advertising agencies, and coaching with lots of executives from companies around the world. And we saw firsthand what people were challenged by. We saw that people felt like you just have to put your life on hold in order to achieve success. Like if you're going to climb the ladder, if you're going to make it, achieve your aspirations and dreams, you can't do everything. You can't, have, all the other stuff in your life. And I think a lot of people just felt like that's just what it takes to be successful. And we felt like there was another way. And we joined forces and put our heads together and launched Fast Forward.
I love it. And you guys have coached over 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Like that. So I'm really impressed by that. I mean, I remember one of the things that I thought about through even my coach training was that like the majority of the coaches coming out aren't actually going to make a living coaching.
Yeah.
And you guys have more than done that. Can you tell us just a little bit? I'm just curious about you and your sort of trajectory.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So, I had my own coaching practice before Lisa and I started the business, and I loved it. I loved being able to drive impact with individuals and help them to, achieve their potential in life. But I came to a crossroads in about late 2012 and said to myself, okay, this is great, but there's got to be a way to give people the same tools, the same system, but do it at scale and be able to give this to more people at a time. And so that's really what Fast Forward enabled us to do. So we came up with this approach that was deeply transformative, but also very simple and very actionable and very easy to be able to deliver to many people at a time. And that is why we've been able to work with so many people. And people have sort of adopted this system. And really, the results have been nothing short of inspirational. And it's been global, right? So it's not just, oh, this is really great for people in the United States, or this is really great for people in Europe. Really, the results have been quite universal over time. And we've been blessed to have started with some really big, high-profile clients who have adopted this approach. And then we've sort of scaled from there. And the first client, and this was, remembering back in 2012, 2013, was Facebook. And they were, experiencing like rapid growth, rapid change. And they had all these people so excited to be working at Facebook. But the leader who hired us said, I'm just afraid people are going to not be able to keep up the pace. Like it's just, intense. And she felt like we really need this program that you guys have and that you're building. And so we came in and did that program with executives from around the world at Facebook, many thousands of them. And, the rest has been history, really.
It's amazing. I think that's amazing. And did you primarily work with the C-suite, or was it accessible? Because you said executives. I mean, was it their leaders to then bring it to their teams, or you work directly with the teams too?
When we first started, we were working with whole teams. So it was everyone from the leader of the team to the middle tier people of the team to the, people who were just sort of at the, beginning part of their career journey.
Yeah.
And it was all of them. And even to this day, we work with many, many different levels. Actually, we love working with C-suite because they can drive change throughout an organization. But as many of us know, and especially women, when you're in the middle of your career is when many people are experiencing the most challenge because you're stretched so thin and trying to, make it. And I think our program, that's a sweet spot for us.
I love that. And there were a lot of case studies, obviously, that showed people who were not at the C-suite, but I was just curious, if you started there, so it was always for everyone.
Yeah, always for everyone.
Yeah. But it does need to come top down, right? Because they're going to drive the culture.
Yeah. I think in a perfect world, if you're working with an organization, you start at the top and then work your way, through the organization. But if we have a company come to us and say, the top people aren't ready yet, they're not they want this for others, we will start there and try to sort of go outwards from the center. And that's fine. That works too.
Sure. Because they have happier employees who feel on track and like with purpose, and they know where they're going. So there's so many things that I want to cover. I guess I'm curious though, when you do the program, do you pick like one area of like, let's say, because you said, it's hard to balance time. Like we're all in on the work, let's say, and everything else is like totally neglected. Can the year vision include multiple goals, or is it better to like laser focus?
Yeah. So when we think about this notion of writing a vision, we ask people to zoom out into the future a year and imagine what their whole life could look like in a year. Mm-hmm. And the exercise that we have people do encompasses 7 questions. And the questions they really range from the specifically professional to questions about personal, specific personal outcomes that you want to produce in your life, which, by the way, most people put so much more rigor around planning and outcome and goal setting for their work life than they do for their personal life. I mean, for most people, it's like, okay, I have this whole plan for my career or my work, and then I'm just hoping for the best when it comes to the personal. So for many people, just putting intention around personal outcomes is game changing. Because even things as simple as, scheduling doctor appointments and, going to having dinner with your family or taking vacations, things like that. So has been so transformative for so many people. And then the other piece is the things that supersede both work or personal. So we ask the question in the exercise, what are you known for? And that's such a provocative question, because most of the time we are not thinking about what we'd love to be known for by the people in our life that we care about, by communities in our life that we care about. We're just kind of showing up how we show up and then just hoping it all works out. But this exercise really gives us this, really, I think meaningful opportunity to be thoughtful about how we want to show up, even if it's different than how we're showing up today, right? Because, for many of us, we're going around telling people how busy we are, right? We're going around our lives saying, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm so stressed out. I'm so busy. And if that's what you're telling people, guess what? That's how they're going to know you.
Yeah.
And, and it's just for most of us, it's really not how we'd want to be known. And so being intentional about how you want to be known professionally, personally, to your children, to your employees, to your manager, to a client, forces us to slow down and really think about how we're showing up every day. And that can be very powerful as well.
Yeah. And I think you need to be committed and want to make the change, because with awareness, it's actually hard to go back. Right. And then it empowers you to take the action that you need to take. But without the awareness, like you said, I think was it Lisa in the book the team was all like, too busy, doesn't have enough time for me. And it was like, oh, wait, if this is the consistent feedback, let's pull back and do things different. And that's exactly what she did, right?
That's exactly right. It's sort of like sometimes you just need to kind of come face to face with, well, what's the gap between how I'm showing up today and how I want it to look in the future? And then you can start taking action. And, people sometimes say like, well, gosh, how do I start taking action? Like, how does that happen? And what we always tell people, and this is so simple, but yet so transformative, is that it starts in language, because language creates reality, right? Like what we say determines what we'll do and how we feel about it. And, and the whole path forward. So if you're going around telling people, I'm really busy, or I'm really tired, or I'm really stressed, or using language like that, the first thing you could do is start using different language when you're talking about yourself to other people, and I know sometimes it's habitual, but, when I did this exercise years ago, I started telling people when they would say to me like, hey, Wendy, how you doing? Instead of telling them, oh yeah, I'm great, I'm really busy, I would say, I am in demand. Because
I love that.
Because I would much rather be known as somebody who's in demand versus somebody who's really busy.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And it's reframing it for yourself so that you start language, right? And you start embodying that. So let's take it a step back because there's a ton of, exercise, you've got your 5 power principles. Let's just start with I love defining like the terms we're sort of working with. What is a power principle?
What is a power principle? Well, that is a great question. And we came up with that term because we wanted this to feel kind of systematic, right? So that people could feel like, okay, like there's actually a framework I could follow and that will make a difference. And so a power principle is, these are sort of these very simple yet very insightful kind of action phrases, if you will, that people can immediately grasp what they mean. And we give people, as we define them, really actionable sort of steps to apply them to their life. So for example, the first power principle, and we think this is the foundation really of the work that we do, is to declare a bold vision and share it. And the words of that are, we always start with a verb, right? Declare. And the word choices of the power principles are very intentional.
Yes.
And, every power principle gives people these very meaningful insights, right? Like this whole notion of standing in the future and writing a vision, very insightful. And yet we also give them 7 specific questions to respond to. And in the answering of those questions, you gain so much focus and clarity on what you'd love your life to look like a year in the future. So I think the key with power principles is them being extremely concise, extremely insightful, and yet actionable and simple to apply.
Okay. Well, let's take them through some of the sort of tactical stuff because there's different sort of categories.
Yeah.
There's an exercise based on a famous writer.
Yeah.
So it's what is it? I have to read.
Throw your hat over the wall.
All right. So what is that?
Okay. So I will tell you the story of throwing your hat over the wall. So it is that slogan. It comes from an Irish writer, and his name is Frank O'Connor.
Yeah.
And he told the story from when he was a child, and he was, growing up, and he and his friends after school, they'd go on these long walks through the countryside wearing their school uniforms, which included a hat.
Yeah.
And whenever they'd come upon a wall in a garden or an orchard, and it was like they couldn't figure out how they were going to get over the wall to keep passing, they'd all take their hats off their head and just toss their hats over the wall. So they would have no choice but to try to go figure out how they were going to go get them, right? Because you're not going to show up at school without your hat, right?
Yeah.
So, we look at this as a metaphor for people in terms of, when you think about goals and things that are like really, really inspiring, oftentimes we feel this compelling need to know how we're going to do it before we will tell people that we're going to do it. So whether that's like, running a marathon, or you're going to get a job in a new city, or you're sort of taking on a new health endeavor and you're going to, start exercising, lose weight, to sort of, deal with your, kind of physical well-being. We often feel like we have to figure it out first, but then we'll tell people what it is. And this throws that on its head, right? Because this throwing your hat over the wall is telling people, I'm going to do this before you know all the steps to making it happen. And it's an entirely new way of thinking about goal setting and setting out aspirations. It lets people dream a little bigger, and think a little bit more broadly about their own life, not limited to the need to know how. And when we say to people in our program, we ask people, where in your life have you done this? Because I think if you ask yourself, okay, gosh, where in my life have I done this before? You will find that you have, right? There have been places where you've said, you know what? I did this last year. I said I was going to buy a new house. I had no idea how I was going to come up with the down payment, but I told someone, and then I figured out how I was going to do it. Or I've never done a half marathon before, but I declared I was going to run one. And then I got very disciplined and intentional and resourceful, and I figured it out. And so when people see that they've done it before, they kind of understand how this could potentially apply to things they have not yet done and things that they could then write down and put in their bold vision and go after, even if they don't know how.
I love it. It's actually making me think of starting the podcast. So I had one in 2008. And when I relaunched, For probably a few months, I was like, I'm gonna launch another podcast. I'm gonna launch another podcast. And by saying it, I was sort of committing myself to it without realizing it. And the next thing I know, I set up the first interview, and I was taking the steps. I found the editor, batch recorded 10 of them, and I was off to the races. And that was almost 5 years ago. But so I think it's really powerful what you're saying.
That's where it begins. And that's an excellent example of throwing your hat over the wall. And I think the other thing that we know from research is that when people write down their aspirations, just by writing it down, they're 42% more likely to make it happen.
Yes.
But then the next piece is that by telling someone that you're going to do something, you're actually twice as likely to make it happen. And I think part of that is because the person that you tell has the potential to help you, to support you, to hold you accountable. And so, for that reason, this notion of throwing your hat over the wall, it always involves telling someone, right? Which really helps us sort of just double down on the things that, we really want to make happen. So that's another, when sometimes people say, where do I start? I say, start there. Start there.
Yeah.
What would you love to make happen? Where could you throw your hat over the wall? And this is an annual exercise. People do this every year, and they throw their hat over the wall for something new.
Who do you share that vision with, though? How broadly do you share it? Because I feel
that's a great question.
because I think there's that fear of like, oh, I'm going to look like a failure, or I have a book I've been wanting to write for 10 years.
Yeah.
I've written a chapter. I've taken the writing course. I've taken steps. So we'll unpack that next, but just like, who do you tell first?
Okay. So that's a great question. And we recommend when people first write a vision, we always tell them, we always call it a fast forward buddy, right?
Okay. Fast forward buddy.
A buddy. Yeah.
Perfect. Accountability.
And a fast forward buddy is an accountability partner. And that could be someone in your life that you trust, who is someone who's on, rooting for you in your life, and start by reading it to them. And that is a good first person to read your vision to. And, we always tell people, read it slowly, don't try to just claim it or qualify it, just read it. And share what at the end, maybe share what felt kind of bold about it, what feels uncomfortable, right? Because it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to share that.
Yes.
And ask that person to hold you accountable and be somebody that you actually can check in with on it periodically. The next kind of frontier of sharing would be, if you work in an organization, is sharing it with your manager. And a lot of people say, what? Like, that's crazy. But we would say, if there's parts of your vision that you feel like, okay, that's just a little too personal, or I don't feel comfortable sharing that because maybe it's something about wanting to get a different job. Okay, don't share that part, but share what you can share. Share what you can feel comfortable sharing, because your manager is somebody who can actually help you, particularly on the professional front, but sometimes even on the personal front, to make it happen. And they can hold you accountable. And I'll give you one example, is that there was a woman that, we worked with years ago, and she shared that her son was on a soccer team, and she had been asked to be an assistant coach on the soccer team. And she had previously been saying no to that because their team meeting was always at 4:30.
Yeah.
So she wasn't able to make it. And when she read her vision to her manager, he said, why are you not doing this? And she said, well, I can never get to the practice because the team meeting, and he moved the team meeting. Like, she just never thought to do that before.
Yeah.
And so that's just a, small example of how sharing your vision can start clearing out obstacles and get you closer to having, your dreams sort of become something that's actually reality. So your manager, and then obviously people in your life that really matter to you. If you're in a relationship, a significant other, a spouse, that's a really good person to share your vision with as well, because they're probably in it.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are the key. Those are the key people.
Okay. It's not, the person you're meeting, in line at getting coffee. No, I'm joking a little bit, but you want to be selective about it, and thinking about who's going to keep you accountable, who's got maybe their goals. Maybe they have a marathon goal. They've been wanting to do one, and you've got you're transitioning to a new career or something, and you guys can just be that support system. And I know how
and by the way, if you are somebody who is a leader in an organization where, maybe you're not at the very top, but you have people on your team, oftentimes people on your team, they're very, very interested in what your vision is because it affects them. So reading it to your team is another really great idea because, all of us say we want to be more strategic. People, we want to be more visionary. We want to be an inspirational leader. And this is that. This is an opportunity to motivate and inspire your team. Having a vision is a very galvanizing tool.
Totally.
To get people aligned behind a common purpose.
I'm laughing because I'm remembering I used to take my team out every holiday season for a lunch. And I'd be like, what are the 3 things you want to accomplish in the next year? And I think half of them enjoyed doing it and the other half did not. But the ones that liked doing it, when we would revisit at the end of, the next year, doing it for the following, they had achieved those goals.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that, which is very funny.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Yes. And actually, one of the things that I've heard from people, we've had so many people who have done this. And, one of the other power principle has to do with creating a plan to make it happen. Yes. Those people who write a vision and have a plan, I check in with them often. People, I maybe haven't seen them in 6 months or a year or sometimes later. And people always tell me, I wish I had gone bigger. And I kept a few things smaller, fearing that I might fail. It might not happen. I don't want to look foolish. I don't want to have egg on my face. And I kind of played maybe a little smaller. And I wish I had gone bigger because I accomplished everything I wrote down.
I love it.
And then some. And that gives many people the courage and the confidence to be able to go a little bigger the next year. So I think for those people who are saying, God, maybe I want to do this exercise, that would be the coaching is play big. Why? And if you fail, so what? You'll try again next year. Lisa and I had that we were going to write a book. That was in our vision for years.
Okay.
Years.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
Yes. For years, that was in our vision. And every year it'd be like, okay, that didn't happen this year. And we would sort of reflect and say, is it still important to us? If it's still important, okay, we're going to put it in again next year. And then here we are. And now it's happened. So I think oftentimes the fear of failure is so profound for so many people. And that is alone the thing that gets in the way of us realizing our ambitions and dreams. There's a scientist named Daniel Kahneman. He's done a lot of studies on risk aversion. And he has this one thing that he studied, which is that people will do more to avoid failure than they will to achieve an equal gain, right? So what that means is you will do more to avoid losing $100 than you will to gain $100, which is, just so crazy. And yet that is part of what it is to be human.
100%. And, I think the women who listen to this show have the intention around exploring what they truly desire and wanting to, have a bold vision. But I think especially women in midlife might have aging parents they're dealing with or loss of a parent, kids going off. Maybe they're suddenly becoming empty nesters and like adjusting to all these changes. It's just a unique time. And I have friends, losing their jobs out of the blue, just not expecting that. So a lot of transition. So I think it's important because I think it's giving you a foundation and some grounding when you're thinking about like what could be next. So with that in mind, how does somebody like play with that? So, especially when their lives aren't always their own, even though I know you talk about it's the language we say and we have more control than we think. Yes.
Yeah. There's two different, there were two questions in there. And I'm going to start with the first one, which is, people who are in the middle of their lives who are kind of pulled in a million directions. Like whether you're, you have young children or you have older parents that you have to take care of. One of the biggest blockers for many people and women in particular is time, is the feeling of time constraint and 100%. Just feeling like there just aren't enough hours in the day to be able to do what I need to do. And I think, sometimes people are just like running around being busy with a to-do list, just trying to like get it all done and then like pass out at the end of the day, right? And then do it all over again.
Yes.
And it tends to make us sort of in a reactive mode. Like we're sort of in this reactive mode where we're just sort of like just trying to kind of play whack-a-mole with the different, aspects of our life. And I think one of the things that is so essential to writing a vision is that it forces you to slow down and really be thoughtful about what is important. Where do I want to spend my time and energy this year? And by consequence, where do I not? And when you do that, a really interesting thing happens is that you automatically start deprioritizing certain things, certain people, certain obligations that you might have been reactively just saying yes to. You might be on autopilot, just doing certain things, and then realizing, I don't want to be doing these things. Like, this is not how I want to spend my time. And having a little more intentionality on how you spend your time, it makes a huge difference. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to control everything. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have fire drills and some days are going to be better than others. But if you keep on having something to keep coming back to, a North Star, you will find that you're spending more time doing the things that matter to you. And I'm going to give you an example of this that is from my own life that might, open some things up for some of the folks listening to this. And that example is that I always come into the new year thinking about my vision. I always write my vision at the beginning of the year. And this year, I decided that one of the things that I was going to put in my vision was that this was going to be a year where I really wanted to focus on being connected to people in my life. And, I think I had looked at the year, I kind of reflected on the previous year and realized I'd said no to so many people and things, sort of deprioritizing them, thinking I'm too busy for, to like meet somebody for coffee or mentor a young person or, help out a family member who might need something. And I just said to myself, that's what I want to be doing. Like, I want to be out there with people I care about. And I realized that because I just spent the time thinking about it. I want to, that's what's going to make me feel fulfilled and happy. So what I do doesn't mean I spend all my time doing that. I obviously have lots of other things to do. I'm running a business, writing a book. I have a family. I have 3 children. And, but every week I think about, how am I going to be more connected this week? What am I going to say yes to? And what am I going to say no to? And I feel that I've said yes to so many things I might have not said yes to. And I organized around it just by setting that intention and believing that it was possible. And so that is just a small example of really changing how you operate around time. Knowing and saying, I have exactly enough time for what I really care about. Doesn't mean you have time for everything, but you have time for what's really important to you. So I think, like, for people who are sort of struggling with the fog of busyness, really taking on a mindset that you do have time for what really matters to you and what are the things that maybe you could deprioritize.
Yeah. Okay. And you said I asked 2 questions in there.
Yes,
so
you mentioned people who are in transition.
Yes.
People who are sort of in a place in their life that, kind of like maybe they've just left a career that they were in for a long time.
Yeah.
They're kind of saying, well, what am I going to do next? How am I going to think about the future?
Yes.
And a lot of times one of the challenges is they think about all the things all the unknowns, right? I can't write a vision. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know what I want, right? I've heard that from so many people. And I always say to people, well, let's look at what you do know, right? So if you answer the question, what do you want to be known for?
I love that.
That is a question that people can answer, right? We all can answer that question. If you ask people to describe the quality of important relationships, and that is also a question that we ask people.
Yeah.
They can answer that. Who are the people that matter? And what would I love those relationships to look like a year out? And what do I want my outlook to look like? How do I want to, if you think about your outlook as like the lens through which you see the world, how do I want that to look? those are good places to start, even if you don't know everything, because what winds up happening is that by answering the questions that you do know, it sheds way more light on the unknowns and leads you closer to those answers as well.
This is so good. I mean, I'm thinking about, I did the 10-year vision. I just had so many people just talking about this. And I was like, let's play, let's have some fun. And I took the time, like you said, to vision into that. But I would need to kind of revisit that to see if like it's on track. So if we're looking a year out, you just talked about checking in weekly. Are we also, you talked about like every 90 days, like, are we kind of doing check-ins along the way?
Yeah.
I just think some sort of structures, like, can
so
you talk about that?
I think that's a great question. Like, people always say, okay, now I have my vision. Like, how do I use it? Like, how do I
now what?
become like, a day-to-day tool? Because what you don't want to do is write it, stick it in a drawer somewhere and have it collect dust. So we typically tell people to write it, share it, and read it I would say at least maybe once a month.
Okay.
You're reading it.
Yes.
And you're saying, how am I doing? Am I on track? Where do I need to press harder? Where have I completely fallen off the rails? And then the beauty of doing that is that you can get yourself back on track pretty easily. The other thing too is that you can reassess. Sometimes things change. And I was working with a group of people once and asking them to go back and read their vision. And some of them hadn't read it, and it had been like 6 months. And they went back and read it. And then somebody raised their hand and said, I went back and read this. I realized some of these things I've accomplished. I feel really proud of them. Some of them I haven't. And I know I need to reset and kind of double down. And then there's a few things in here that I just don't care about them anymore. And the beauty is that this is a tool for people to take ownership of their own life, and it's okay to change it. And I think that sometimes that feeling, a lot of times people feel like, oh, I better know for sure, this is going to be etched in stone, but it's not.
I love
it's
it.
Not etched in stone.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how you said you start in the new year, but somebody in theory could start anytime, right? Don't be locked into thinking, oh, well, we're in, this will come out in September or whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
This is anytime. This is something you can do anytime. And I think, this is an incredible tool to use to not only keep yourself on track with specific concrete goals, but to really keep course correcting about being the person that you really want to be.
Yeah.
And also manage the relationship you have with yourself. Right. And a lot of times, I've had people, this one woman once, and she wrote her vision, and I said, how do you feel about it? And she said, I read this and I realized I left myself out of my vision.
Oh my God.
This is a woman who is, a busy working mother. And she's, I had my children in there, my husband was in there. And I even wrote things about my dog, and I wasn't in my vision. And I said, that is so funny, but you got to put yourself in. How do you want to treat yourself? How do you want to, take care of yourself and feel as a result of that at the end of the year? And, so many of us don't give ourselves the same respect mentally and physically that we do to everyone else in our lives. And this is a chance to put some intention around that.
100%. I always think, if you're looking back, let's say at the end of your life, I don't want any of us regretting that we literally just gave to everyone else. So this is so tangible and doable. And I love the focus on sort of who you want to be in the world, not just like checking things off like, okay, yes, congrats on your book. It's fantastic. I have a book. I hope to have that out in the world, right? I wanted to launch the podcast. It's there. But there's also what you talked about, wanting to be connected to the people you love. Like, it's so much more profound than just the achievements.
Yes. The other piece that I think adds another layer of depth and also motivation for people is not only writing the what, but also the why. And that would be if let's say something that's really important to you is being more calm, being more present with people. The very next question is, why does that matter? And what difference will that make? What difference will it make for you to be calm and present? Because if you answer that question, first of all, you'll clarify it for yourself. Like, am I just saying this because it seems like a, check the box, good thing to say?
Yes.
Why does this matter to me? How will this make a difference in my life? The same thing, even for the concrete goals, I would challenge people. If you're saying, I want to go to the gym and I want to get healthy and I want to sleep, what difference will that make? If you're sleeping 7 or 8 hours a night, what is the impact of that? And I think people find that when they answer that question, they're way more inspired to do it.
Yes. I was thinking as you were talking, it's way more motivating. Like I was thinking about that book that's been playing in my head for 10 years, but does it get into your calendar? And like, obviously you wrote a book with someone else. So you also had to combine their priorities with yours. So that's adds other layers. You're also running a whole business together and all of that. But, that is important to me. And they say, if you don't prioritize it, it means it's not important. I actually disagree with that. It is important to me. It's just a matter of fitting it in. So how does somebody reframe that or like actually make the time? What's the shift that needs to happen?
I'm glad you asked that because I do think that, it's one thing to write a vision. And then the next thing is how do you create a plan for yourself to make it happen? And that is another tool that we, spend time on in our book and in our program. We have our second, or I think it's our second or third power principle is plan the work and work the plan. And we give people a 90-day action plan approach to start to, unpack these outcomes and make them happen. And what's different about this plan than how people usually think about planning is that we always start with the outcome. We start with the finish, right? It's not just like, well, what are all the different actions we should take? But it's sort of, okay, if the outcome is, at the end of the year, I will have written a book, then you say to yourself, okay, what are 3 actions or practices that I could start taking now that are going to start getting me in that direction? Doesn't mean you're only going to take 3 actions, but you're going to do 3 at a time, right? Mm-hmm. And then you keep updating the dashboard. So, and sometimes people put actions that are not one action, but it's like 20 actions in one. We tell people, no, just 1 at a time.
Yes.
So the first thing might be, I am going to, talk to somebody who's written a book recently.
Yeah.
We're going to have, 3 conversations with recent new authors. And that would be an example of an action that you could take that you see that action on your dashboard and you say, I could do that.
Yes.
I have time for that.
Yes.
And that is where it begins is really one foot in front of the other. And having a plan like that makes an enormous difference. Otherwise, you're just spinning and, working your usual to-do list and you're sort of, lost in the woods.
Yes.
But the plan makes an enormous difference. So that's been really, really helpful for many of the people that we've worked with over the years as well.
I love it. Any favorite success stories? I mean, you worked with so many major corporations. Do you have one that do you have a favorite?
We have so many. And actually, when we were preparing for this conversation with you and some others, we were like, what are some of the ones we should tell? But I'll share one that kind of made it to the short list. And I love this story and I love the person that it's about. But we had a woman that we worked with from a big finance company, from a big bank. And she, worked with us, did our program. And one of the things that she realized in writing her vision was this wasn't really what she wanted to do. And as she thought about what she wanted to do, she saw that what she really wanted to do was really help other women to ascend and thrive within their organization, a very male-dominated organization. It was a very hard place to climb the ladder as a woman. And she, she didn't even know if this was a real job that she could get, but she wrote about it in her vision and why it was important to her to do this. And it was like really compelling to her, even though she didn't know how. And even though she did not have the clear path to get there. But what she did do is she read her vision to her manager who was pretty high up in the organization, who also happens to be a woman, another one of the few senior level women in this company. And her manager, their company being a public company, had put some gender, kind of objectives. There were some things they wanted to be able to accomplish as it related to achieving more gender parity. And so they were going to put some budget against achieving that. And her timing was, fortuitous. And they said, we actually do want to create a role around this. We do want to have a leader in a role that will be related to helping women thrive and ascend in this organization. And she started a huge movement within the organization, got this job. We actually wound up working with her in that capacity, working with thousands of women across the board at this firm. And we had the privilege of being able to, help them fuel their confidence and success in that organization. And she has been just lit up. I mean, it was a life change for her. And it would never have happened if she hadn't thrown her hat over the wall, believed that the future could look different than the past, told someone, and then made it happen.
I've loved this conversation so much. I feel so inspired, and it's also so actionable. I mean, everyone can go out and get the book. Tell us the name of the book so everyone can go get it.
Okay, so this book is called Fast Forward: 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year.
Love it. And I love the whole concept. I love that it's way more tangible. Have your big picture 10-year long-term goal, like Dr. Gladys said, and then bring it back like Wendy and Lisa say, and just like craft it down to that year and just start getting to know yourself and have some fun. Wendy, anything I didn't cover today that you're like, oh gosh, I really want to leave the women listening with?
I would say there's one thing, and some people might be listening to this and saying to themselves, like, this sounds really inspirational, but it also sounds really uncomfortable. And what I want to share one of our mantras. One of our mantras is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's that the notion of being uncomfortable becomes so less daunting once you've actually done it. When we practice doing things, you just get better at them.
Yes.
We all do. So if you're saying to yourself, like, it feels a little uncomfortable, lean in and give it a shot. Buy our book, read it, try it, and get comfortable being uncomfortable. And you will be amazed at the results that you will see for yourself.
I love it. And I'm going to ask you just one final question. What does living a good life look like or mean to you?
Living a good life to me is living a life of intention and being thoughtful about who I want to be in the world, what I want to spend my precious time doing, and contributing. And it's as simple as that.
It's beautiful. I've loved this conversation so much. All of the show notes for today will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com, a link to Wendy and Lisa's book, their website, their social handles. Where do you like to hang out online?
You can find us on LinkedIn.
Yes.
That's our primary platform. We're also on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you gained some new information or inspiration for your life. That the essence of this show is to really wake up to what's possible for you, to reclaim your beautiful voice, and to really learn to love and prioritize yourself. So if you gained any value from any of the conversations you've tuned into, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. You can do that right now on your phone. And please do consider leaving a rating and review if you have yet to do so on Apple Podcasts. It's actually how more women can find the show. And I really want to grow a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you as always for tuning in. And I look forward to reconnecting with you next Wednesday. Bye for now.